Welcome to Inside Badger Nation on Madison CW. Now your hosts, Ben Wargle and Phil Dawson.
Welcome into Inside Badger Nation. Phil and Ben with you again. Phil Dawson for the Big 1070 here in Madison, joined by Ben Wargle, BadgerNation.com, the editor and publisher there. Plenty to get to today, including Badger football, basketball, and recruiting. How are we going to do that? Well, we'll start with some hoops for you. That includes what the Badgers did in the Big 10 ACC Challenge. A basketball recap for you there, as well as taking a look at what Bo Ryan did to reach number win 300 for the University of Wisconsin. And can you believe they're ranked number 4 overall? Get into that a little bit. Also, take a look at the Badger football team in the Capital One Bowl against South Carolina. An update on a recruit who's decided not to come to Wisconsin. We'll have our IBN's Most Wanted and our email question of the week. So as usual, it's completely jammed packed. Here's what we got for you. We'll start with Badger hoops, because what happened? Well, the Badgers won again. They continue to do that. At least as of this taping, went to the Charlottesville Arena, took out Virginia 48-38 in the Big 10 ACC Challenge, a game in which, they shot only 29%, but they made more and held Virginia to just 23% shooting, Ben. A game that featured, not a whole heck of a lot of scoring, but certainly Wisconsin did just enough to get by Virginia. Big win for the Big 10 in this Big 10 ACC Challenge, where they finished up tied with the ACC. Yeah, one of only 2 road wins in the entire challenge. North Carolina won at #1 Michigan State, and then this big win for Wisconsin. A complete role reversal from last year's 60-54 Virginia win in Madison. That game, Virginia much more aggressive in the low post, got all the 50-50 balls. This was a game where Wisconsin's low post defense was stellar, and Frank Kaminsky had a big part of that. You see him here with the free throw. Kaminsky 1 point away from a double-double. Nigel Hayes had a nice cup of coffee in this game too, with some low post production. The second chance opportunities, which you saw there with Kaminsky, were big in this game, as were the perimeter shots. You just look at this game, it was a hard game, hard sledding game. You see a lot of misses here, but the key for Wisconsin was defensively. They didn't allow Virginia many opportunities to find a rhythm. And Virginia only 38 points, the lowest in the shot clock era for the Cavaliers. And Wisconsin was just real aggressive in this game. They took it personally what happened last year in Madison, that Virginia was the tougher team, the more aggressive team, the team that just seemed to have a more will and desire to win the game than Wisconsin did. And I think Josh Gosser being back provided a big lift for this team. You saw him against Joe Harris and the job he did defensively. This was just a really stellar game for Wisconsin. This was a big win to get for the Badgers, especially coming on the road, just their second true road win of the season in 2 chances. And speaking of Gosser, as you saw him hitting a free throw there at the end, he holds Joe Harris to just 2 points, who had 22 in Madison a year ago in the same Big 10 ACC Challenge, but just 1 of 10 from the field. Josh Gosser making an instant impact. Also, the Badgers got another win as they took out Marquette in their in-state rivalry. How did they do that? Again, more offense and defense, and like you said, 50-50 balls all went to Wisconsin in this game. Yeah, this was another game where Wisconsin last year was kind of out-toughed in the low post. A Marquette team that was very aggressive last year, got a lot of rebounds. Devontae Gardner was a big reason for that for Marquette. And Sam Decker in this game simply took over. You look at the first 10 minutes of this game, Decker only had 2 shots and only made 1, that slam dunk. But at this point, this bucket right here, this kind of got him going a little bit. Trayvon Jackson said, "You're too good of a player not to be shooting more." And Decker kind of took over the game at a long stretch. Had his second double-double in 3 games. Josh Gosser, again, a huge lift for Wisconsin. You can just tell that this team really missed this guy last year. And Ben Bruss, too, although you're going to see him not have a very good great moment here of this game,
Get up, Ben!
What was bad, but it turns good, Ben. Look at the hustle and the good look from Decker to Frank. It turns good. I mean, this is one of the examples we were talking about getting the 50-50 loose balls, getting the opportunity to allow your offense another chance to make a bucket. And Wisconsin did that and plays like that throughout the entire game. Ben Bruss, 2 for 9 last year from 3-point range for Wisconsin. A much better performance in this game. A slew of Badgers in double figures for this game. This was a big shot, too, by Kaminsky. You see a 3-point game with a minute and a half left. That 3 by Kaminsky got the lead up to 6. Marquette never got to closer to 4 the rest of the way. Yeah, and they also hit their free throws down the stretch in the final minute. They go 10 of 11 from the free throw line. They hit their last 8 in a row from the charity stripe, and that's when Marquette was doing their best to stay in that one. Some desperation threes falling for Jameel Wilson, and sure enough, the Badgers able to seal it at the free throw line. Big win. Now, win number 300 came for Badger head coach Bo Ryan when they were in Virginia, and we'll dive more into that in a little bit. But also, Sam Decker, the Badgers go up to number 4 in the AP rankings this week. Deserving of that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at how well they've been playing. You look at their resume. They haven't been a great team yet this year, but they've been a lot of really good teams. Florida, St. Louis, West Virginia, Virginia, Marquette. I mean, they've won a lot of really good games this year, and they're 10-0. They're the only team in the country as of this taping to be 10-0. And just a truly remarkable start to the season for Wisconsin. They got some big opportunities this week, too. I mean, they played Milwaukee yesterday. I mean, did they win? Ooh, well, we don't know. Then you have the Eastern Kentucky game on Saturday. Eastern Kentucky took VCU to overtime. And then you get 2 weeks off to really recoup and really get your legs ready for Big Ten play, which starts January 2nd at Northwestern. Yeah, we'll dive more into that as we approach the Big Ten season and also check in once again on Bo Ryan, some of the top moments in his 300 wins. But when we come back, the Capital One Bowl, that's where the Badger football team is going. We go there next on IBN. Welcome back to Inside Badger Nation. Phil and Ben with you, and plenty to get to this time as we have Badger football to talk about. Because guess what? They're going to a bowl game after a little bit of disappointment after the Penn State loss. They still get to find themselves playing on January 1st. Down, well, here at the Capital One Bowl. Yeah, in Orlando, Florida. The Badgers, as you see, 9-3 against South Carolina. The Gamecocks out of the SEC who finished their season 10-2. Now, quick little update about South Carolina. What are you getting? Getting a team that, as you see, is 10-2, but they also have some top-tier wins. Taking out Central Florida, winner of the AAC. They took out Missouri, a team that played in the SEC championship game. Also beat a top 10 team in Clemson, as you can see here. And this is a team that is led by their quarterback, Connor Shaw, a dual-threat quarterback. Never lost a game at their home stadium, did South Carolina. When Connor Shaw was under center. Has the most wins in South Carolina history. He's a guy that threw for 2,100 yards, 650 rushing yards, plus only 1 interception on the year. Maybe even more so well known, their defense. And Jadeveon Clowney had that big hit in the Outback Bowl against Michigan. A lot of speculation about his status. And there's Shaw finding his receiver. They call it a touchdown here. But Jadeveon Clowney is a guy who last year had 13 sacks. This year, just waiting for the eligibility to go to the NFL, just 3.5 going into this game. But he's had some help along the defensive line. Kelsey Corliss, 9.5 sacks for the South Carolina team. So the double team going to Clowney, and Corliss is finding himself to the quarterback. And this is where the matchup hinges on, Ben, and we can jump into this. Wisconsin, a 2.5-point favorite going into this game, which may seem odd to some, but here's the deal. South Carolina gave up 227 yards rushing to Georgia. Brett Bielema in Arkansas gashed them for 218 yards rushing. Florida even put 200 yards rushing on them. And you know, the one thing that Wisconsin has going into bowl season that no other team has, 2 running backs that are averaging 110 yards at least per game. So that's what the matchup hinges on. And of course, if South Carolina is able to stop the run, can Joel Stavey get it done for the Badgers, something he hasn't really been able to show here as of late? Yeah, South Carolina's defense really prides itself on turnovers, just 20 points per game allowed in the SEC. That's a really good mark. And you mentioned some of the big wins. And certainly talking to Gary Anderson this week, he said the passing game has to improve. And if it doesn't, this is going to be the one issue that's really going to hinder Wisconsin. I mean, you look at the last stretch for Wisconsin, the lack of big plays for this team over the last 5 games. Minus Indiana. Minus the Indiana game. Thanks. I mean, that's perfect timing with the James White play. You take out. They need more of these. They need more of these, exactly. The first 7 games of the year, they average over 6 explosive plays a game, 20 yards or more 7 times a game. The last 5 games of the year where you saw Wisconsin's offense, minus the Indiana game, where you saw Wisconsin's offense kind of get held into the mid-20s or low 20s, Wisconsin averages 5 explosive plays a game. Against Penn State, they only had 4, all in the passing game. And so you could definitely tell that defenses are starting to gear themselves
towards stopping the run. That's putting a lot of pressure on Stave. The last 5 games, he only had 1 game where he threw for over 200 yards. And that was the game against Penn State where he threw for a career high 339, but was picked off 3 times, missed a lot of wide open wide receivers. And Gary Anderson, very blunt earlier this week, he says if the passing game doesn't improve, if we don't get more weapons, it's going to make it very, very hard for us to win this game, especially when they're playing against a defense up to the level of South Carolina's.
Yeah, and again, it's all going to be probably on Joel Stave to make some plays to open up really the run game, because they weren't able to do it here against Minnesota, unable to do it against Penn State, and while it continued to grind away, they may need to make those big plays. So what does this mean now as they get into the bowl season? Being able to go against an SEC opponent, taking on an opponent that, like Wisconsin, had some hopes for a BCS game but didn't quite get there. And after that disappointment, what can a win, what can this do for Gary Anderson and the University of Wisconsin in bowl season in the Capital One Bowl?
Well, I mean, it may just seem like, a simple thing, but, it would put this team on the right track in the offseason. Wisconsin hasn't won a bowl game in the last 3 seasons.
Right.
I mean, you lose the last 3 Rose Bowls, and all in heartbreaking fashion. You haven't won a bowl game since the Champs Sports Bowl against Miami in 2009, which was played at the same stadium as the Capital One Bowl. So maybe some good karma will be coming back for Wisconsin in that sense. You just look at this team, they've had a lot of really good years, but they've had a lot of really tough, close, heartbreaking losses. I think you go into a bowl game and you win, you send these seniors out on the right note, that's going to spark this team coming back. I mean, you look at where this roster is going to be different. This roster is going to be different extremely in the front 7, the defensive line. You lose so many seniors there. You get a win, and that could just build confidence in your younger players going forward to want to keep that winning streak, that winning tradition alive. And, you end the year with an SEC opponent, be able to really test yourself against a good SEC opponent, because what happens next year? You're opening up against LSU, very good SEC opponent in SEC country down in Houston. So this would be a good measuring stick for Wisconsin. The 2.5-point favorites, I was a little surprised by it. I think Wisconsin very good, but South Carolina over 200 yards rushing and passing the game. You mentioned Connor Shaw, 26-5 as a starter. This is going to be a tough game. I'm kind of interested to see what Wisconsin team shows up. Is it going to be the same Wisconsin team that won 6 games in a row, or the Wisconsin team that really kind of fell flat against Penn State and just didn't have that same chip on the shoulder as they did earlier in the year?
We will continue to dive more into this matchup in the coming weeks and take a look at the Capital One Bowl, but we go back to Bo Ryan, win number 300 next. We know that Bo Ryan has been a very good coach at the University of Wisconsin, never finishing below 4th place in the Big Ten in his entire career here, making the tournament every single year as the head coach of the Badgers. But he reached another milestone when the Badgers beat Virginia in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. He reached the plateau that only 8 others have done in the Big Ten, and that's win 300 games.
With Wisconsin's 48-38 win over Virginia on December 4th, Bo Ryan won his 300th game at the University of Wisconsin, becoming the first Badgers coach to reach that mark. Associate head coach Greg Gard, who's been with Bo Ryan almost every step of the way, reacts.
Well, I think the biggest thing is just how we've been able to sustain it over 12 years and now into year 13. To be able to hit 300 wins in this short a time, that averages out, I think, to 24, almost 25 wins a year. So to be able to do that and maintain it and stay at a high level consistently is hard to do. Obviously, it's a tribute to him in terms of his leadership and his expectations and where he sets the bar from the top down. And then also, secondly, we've had very good players that have understood what we want, understood what it took to be successful, bought in, got better as their careers went on. And the combination of when you have very good players and people around you and obviously very good leadership, doesn't guarantee success, but it gives you a greater probability to have some success.
In that 48-38 slugfest, junior Frank Kaminsky scored 9 points and got over 10 rebounds, making him a key component of the victory. Kaminsky, who came in under-recruited, has developed into a pretty solid big man for the Badgers.
It says a lot about him as a head coach, to be successful at different levels and different schools and find ways to do it is a great thing. I think he's a really great coach, and he's found systems that work for him at different levels, and he's really kind of taken off with it, and it's been great. It's great being a part of that and being part of that winning tradition at Wisconsin.
So the first win of the Bo Ryan coaching era at Wisconsin technically came against Hawaii Hilo in the Big Island Invitational on November 23, 2001. But if you ask Greg Gard, the first real win came 29 days later. That was the day the Badgers and their 4-6 record took on number 14 Marquette at the Kohl Center. Wisconsin, heavy underdogs, won 86-73, considered a coming-out party for Ryan and setting the foundation for the Badgers' success.
Well, it helps sustain and establish what we wanted to do in terms of the foundation of the program, in terms of defensively what we wanted to do, offensively how we wanted to play. Because obviously as you're implementing a new system, there's always going to be questioning on whether it'll work or not if you don't have immediate success, and obviously we didn't. We got beat the first game at UNLV and went out to Vegas, or to Hawaii, and I think went 1-2 out there. So, and then come back and go to Georgia Tech and have a 20-point lead and get beat, but then to come back and to be able to put things in place and see guys grow through it and understand what it was going to take, as I mentioned before, in terms of the sustaining the success, that immediate piece of how we had to play to be successful and how we played that game. And we played very well that game. We shared the ball very well. A lot of highlights from that game are still on our teaching clips in terms of swing edits that we use to teach our younger guys. So it yeah, obviously was a great team win against a very good team, and helped just to fortify what we wanted to do. And if we did it the right way, we were going to have success.
Been a real special run for Bo Ryan, his assistant, and of course all the players involved, and of course for the fans too. And now just crossing their fingers, maybe this year could be that special team that they make that Final Four run, maybe even a national championship. I'm calling it. But also, Ben, when we look back at what Bo Ryan has done, I mean, this is 300 wins now at Wisconsin, you know, adding on to the 300 plus that he has at Platteville. He's actually closing in on win number 700 that he could get this year with the Badgers as well. What are some of the moments that jump out to you, either covering the Badgers, following the Badgers, and watching the tenure under Bo Ryan here at Wisconsin?
It's really kind of cool to see those old Marquette highlights, but you know, there's a couple that stand out for me, especially the one probably from their Big Ten sweep 4 years ago when they played at Indiana, the Brian Butch three-point bank shot win. I mean, this was a huge game on the road. 14 Wisconsin going at 12 Indiana. This continued just that streak that Wisconsin had of so many consecutive wins over Indiana, and the streak that continues to this day. And also too, the Josh Gosser three-point shot at Michigan was really special too. I mean, Wisconsin goes into a tough road environment in Michigan, hadn't played really well, and Gosser finds a way with another bank shot three-pointer too. Here it is again. I mean, this was kind of one of those desperation heaves that Jordan Taylor gets double teamed, and I was at this game. That arena was so loud and just got so pitch quiet. You can just see everyone in the background. Oh no! This was a huge win for Wisconsin. This was a year that, you know, the Badgers were still kind of trying to fight out, get those gritty wins, and this was a big one to continue another long streak over Michigan. It's just one of those things where Wisconsin, win or lose, they always seem to, you know, make some big plays down the stretch to give themselves a chance, and certainly this was one of those games where Wisconsin goes into a tough environment, pulls out a big win.
So as we take a look at some of the accomplishments that he's achieved, 300 wins here, certainly big. An Elite Eight run just once, but also the never finishing fourth in the Big Ten maybe stands out as the most impressive, and of course making the tournament run.
Yeah, especially last year too. You look at the amount of injuries this team had. No Gosser last year. Mike Bruzewicz was out for a long period of time. Didn't play really well. Scored like 40 points in 3 straight games, but Wisconsin certainly made, you know, some big wins down the stretch.
All right, we hit the recruiting trail next. Stick around. This is Inside Badger Nation. We invite you to check us out on YouTube, Inside Badger Nation. Just find the search bar, bring your cursor up to it, type Inside Badger Nation, boom, all kinds of videos of Ben and I breaking down Badger stuff. You can also follow us on Twitter at InBadgerNation as well. Keep you up to date on what's happening on the show, and email the program, InsideBadgerNation@gmail.com. We bring you our email of the week each and every week right here. It's brought to you by Restaurant 608. Bar and Grill, downtown Madison, 212 State Street, where 608 is more than just an area code. And our question, courtesy of Brian in Watertown, he said, can the Wisconsin men's basketball team keep a perfect record before hitting Big Ten play? Well, again, as of this taping, they were perfect. We'll find out. I think absolutely they can keep a Big Ten, or a perfect record before they hit Big Ten season. My question to you, Ben, we're going to just kind of throw this out there. What about just staying perfect? When's the first loss on this schedule? Because the Big Ten schedule actually plays out pretty nicely for them if this was actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their next 3 games. In Milwaukee, they played yesterday that we don't know the result of.
Right.
Eastern Kentucky this week, and then they get 2 weeks off and play Prairie View A&M. So hardly world beaters here, and all these games are at home. So you have to like Wisconsin to be 13-0 going into Big Ten play, where they start at Northwestern. Northwestern's down this year. Then you have a couple home games against Iowa and Illinois. Then I believe you go to Indiana too. And Indiana is not the same type of team that they were last year after losing, Zeller and Oladipo and all those key players. So
yeah.
And Wisconsin, like we mentioned last week, Wisconsin's owned Indiana for like the last half dozen years or so. I mean, Wisconsin has a chance they beat Indiana, I believe, to tie the longest winning streak in the series by any team.
Just very impressive.
Yeah, I think the longest Indiana's ever lost to one consecutive opponent was like 12 to Purdue in the 1910s or somewhere around there. It's been a long time. So I really think Wisconsin here can push this a long way, just considering how well they've been playing. They've been playing really well offensively, and now the defense is starting to pick it up. We've seen the last 2 games they're playing more aggressive, they're playing physical. This is a team that if they play this same type of way, they have a chance to beat anyone on their schedule, home or away. And so I think you have to like the chances that Wisconsin can continue to build off this momentum they've been generating and make a strong push to be, challenge Michigan State and Ohio State for that Big Ten title crown.
And don't forget, Bo Ryan has plenty of experience with undefeated teams when he was at Platteville. A couple of big rings that he puts on his finger. All right, let's talk a little recruiting now. We start with the recruiting news of Joe Keels. Let's take a look here because Ben had the update this week. Not going to be a Badger.
Yeah, he originally committed to Wisconsin. He's the cousin of Melvin Gordon, so this was a little bit of a surprise. And he flipped his commitment to Nebraska. And, it got to the point where Keels, just for whatever reason, just didn't become a fit anymore for Wisconsin. Wisconsin actually kind of pulled his scholarship offer, kind of forcing him to take the Nebraska offer. He went on other visits to West Virginia and Illinois. You have to kind of feel that Wisconsin was looking at this situation, and talking to Gary Anderson in the week too. He was like, these bowl practices that Wisconsin has are really key for the Badger coach staff to kind of evaluate their younger players. And you look at a guy like Alec James, Chikwe Obasi, guys who have made strong pushes to be defensive ends in the system, really start to perform well. And so Wisconsin, kind of on the fringe here, need other positions to be filled, need another offensive lineman, need another cornerback. Would like to have Joe Mixon, the 5-star running back from California, a 4-star wide receiver, and Jamil Kamara. So this was a situation where Wisconsin decided that we're no longer going to recruit you. We're going to wish you luck and the best to you. And Joe Keels is heading to Lincoln, Nebraska. And Wisconsin still has the number 18 recruiting class in the country with their 24 commits. They'll be just fine.
All right, and who do they want? Who do we say who's the most wanted? We bring this to you each and every week. Our IBN's most wanted. Bring it up. Check him out, Chris Lammons. Tell us quickly about him, if you could, Ben.
He's a Florida commit, but he visited Wisconsin for an official visit for the Indiana game. Wisconsin coaching staff, Chris Beatty and Ben Strickland, went down to Florida for an in-home visit. And so this is one of those things where Wisconsin doesn't have a true cornerback commit in this class. They have Lubern Figueroa and Austin Hudson. Both these kids are going to play safety. Chris Lammons told me, he's very committed to Florida, unless something drastic happens. But Florida, last I checked, isn't playing in a BCS bowl. They're not playing in a bowl game. Wisconsin might be able to get this kid if they continue recruiting him very, very hard.
All right, we'll recap everything for you next time right here on Inside Badger Nation.